In this example, I need to simplify the square root of 75 minus the square root of negative 27. So let's look at the first part of our expression, the square root of 75. 75 is not a perfect square, so I need to factor it down into factors, some of which are perfect squares. So factoring 75, it is 5 times 15. 5 is prime, and 15 is 5 times 3. So here are all my prime factors. The way I'm going to group them is I'm going to put 5 and 5 together, and then I have my 3. So I'm going to write the square root of 75 as the square root of 25 times 3. Minus, now let's look at our second part of our expression. Be very careful. A lot of students see the negative outside the square root and the one inside. They want to multiply them together. You cannot do that. The one outside has to stay outside. And how do you deal with the square root of a negative number? Let's review that quickly. So the square root of a negative number uses the imaginary unit I that's defined to be I is the square root of negative 1, where I squared is negative 1. So that allows us to take the square root of a negative number. So the square root of negative b is equal to I, the imaginary unit, times the square root of b, where b is a positive number. So that's exactly what I'm going to do here. I'm going to pull out the square root of the negative 1 as I, and then it's going to leave me with the square root of 27. So this is going to give me the first term. I'm going to use the product property of radicals and write it as the square root of 25 times the square root of 3, minus I. Now 27 is not a perfect square. So if we factor it, it's 3 times 9. 9 is a perfect square, and 3 is prime. So I'm going to write it as the square root of 9 times 3. Simplifying the first term, the square root of 25 simplifies to 5. The square root of 3 does not simplify, so my first term just becomes 5 times the square root of 3. Minus I times, now I need to use the product property of radicals, the square root of 9 times the square root of 3. First term is totally simplified, leave it alone. So I have I times, what's the square root of 9? 3 times the square root of 3. So tidying it up, I have 5 times the square root of 3 minus 3I times the square root of 3. Now notice these both have square roots of 3's in them, but the second one is an imaginary term. This is real. You cannot combine them. That is your simplified answer.